In Uganda today, corruption is not merely a problem. For many, it has become a predictable feature of daily existence, an unfortunate but accepted part of the social and political landscape. It is woven into the fabric of public life, from the highest echelons of government down to the most routine interactions with state officials. According to a recent Afrobarometer survey, a staggering 66% of Ugandans believe that corruption has worsened over the past year. This is not just a statistic, it is the lived reality for millions who navigate a system where illicit payments and backroom deals are often the only way to access essential services, secure employment, or obtain justice. This widespread sentiment reflects a deep-seated resignation that the very institutions meant to serve the public are instead designed to extract from it. The normalization of this crisis is deeply troubling. When citizens begin to see graft as a standard operating procedure, the fight against it loses its urgency. The Afrobarometer report highlights that an estimated UGX 9.1 trillion, or about a quarter of the national budget, is lost to corruption annually. This is a colossal sum that could otherwise fund hospitals, build schools, and create opportunities for a youthful population. Instead, these resources are siphoned off, perpetuating a cycle of underdevelopment and inequality. The public's perception is grim, with 72% stating that the government is failing in its duty to combat this pervasive issue, a clear vote of no confidence in the current state of affairs and the political will to change it. This sense of normalcy is reinforced daily in countless small and large ways. For many Ugandans, interacting with the police is a prime example. The data shows that 76% of people who sought assistance from the police ended up paying a bribe, a transaction that has become almost expected. Similarly, accessing medical care in a public hospital, getting a business permit, or even having a case heard in court can involve unofficial facilitation fees. This environment erodes trust and fosters a cynical belief that merit and rules are secondary to connections and cash. It creates a society of two tiers, one for the connected who can afford to bypass the system, and another for everyone else who must either pay up or go without. The psychological impact of this systemic decay cannot be overstated. It breeds a sense of powerlessness and apathy among the general populace. When corruption is perceived as an insurmountable force, people are less likely to resist it or demand change. Instead, they learn to adapt, to play the game, and in doing so, they inadvertently become participants in the very system that oppresses them. This cycle of resignation and adaptation is what makes corruption so entrenched. It is not just about a few bad actors, it is about a culture that has, over time, accepted the unacceptable, viewing the siphoning of public funds not as an outrage but as business as usual. The normalization of corruption is cemented by a glaring culture of impunity, where powerful officials are implicated in massive scandals, yet face minimal if any consequences. This sends a clear message to the public. The rules that apply to ordinary citizens do not apply to the political elite. A prime example is the 2023 Iron Sheet scandal, where top government figures, including 26 ministers and 31 legislators, were accused of diverting iron sheets meant for impoverished communities in the Karamoja region. While the scandal prompted international condemnation and even UK sanctions against Speaker of Parliament Anita Among, meaningful domestic accountability has been conspicuously absent, reinforcing the belief that the powerful are untouchable. This pattern of high-level malfeasance continues unabated, further eroding public trust in institutions like Parliament. In May 2024, another scandal emerged when 4 parliamentary commissioners were accused of irregularly awarding themselves UGX 1.7 billion, or about $440,000 as a service award. The audacity of such an act at a time when ordinary Ugandans are struggling with the cost of living was not lost on the public. While a few members of parliament were later remanded in a separate fraud case in June 2024, these instances often feel like selective justice rather than a systemic effort to clean house. The perception remains that as long as you are politically loyal, you are shielded from prosecution. The judiciary and law enforcement, the very bodies tasked with upholding the law, are widely seen as complicit in this system. Perceptions of judicial corruption have soared, increasing by 27 percentage points between 2012 and 2024. This is compounded by the use of military courts to try civilian opposition figures on politically motivated charges, bypassing the standard legal process and undermining judicial independence. when the courts are not seen as impartial arbiters of justice, but as tools of the state to protect its own, the entire concept of the rule of law collapses. People lose faith that reporting corruption will lead to a fair hearing or a just outcome. This cycle of impunity is a direct consequence of a system where political power is heavily centralized under President Museveni's nearly 40-year rule. Decades in power have weakened the checks and balances that are essential for holding leaders accountable. Institutions that should provide oversight have been systematically undermined or co-opted, creating an environment where loyalty to the regime is valued above integrity and public service. As a result, corruption is not just a byproduct of weak governance, it has become an essential tool for maintaining power, distributing patronage, and ensuring the survival of the political establishment, all at the expense of the Ugandan people. For ordinary Ugandans, the decision to report or protest against corruption is fraught with peril. A pervasive culture of fear, actively cultivated by the state, ensures that most people remain silent. An alarming 83% of citizens believe that reporting graft puts them at risk of retaliation, a figure that has risen significantly since 2019. This fear is not unfounded. It is based on the consistent and often brutal response of the state to any form of dissent. The government has demonstrated time and again that it will use the full force of its security apparatus to suppress anti-corruption voices, making the personal cost of speaking out unbearably high for most. The events of July 2024 serve as a stark and recent illustration of this reality. Inspired by youth-led protests in neighboring Kenya, young Ugandan activists organized demonstrations in Kampala to protest government corruption and the exorbitant salaries of public officials. The response was swift and merciless. President Museveni issued personal threats against the demonstrators beforehand, setting a menacing tone. On the day of the protests, security forces launched a brutal crackdown, arresting over 80 people. They were charged with common nuisance, a vague, colonial-era law frequently used to stifle dissent and punish those who dare to challenge the status quo. This suppression is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader, systematic pattern of repression aimed at silencing activists, journalists, and political opposition. The National Unity Platform, the main opposition party, has claimed that over 2,000 of its activists have been abducted since the 2021 election, a chilling allegation that speaks to a climate of extreme intimidation. When citizens see that those who organize peacefully are met with arrests, beatings, and enforced disappearances, the message is clear: stay silent or face the consequences. This effectively neutralizes one of the most powerful checks on government power, the voice of the people. Ultimately, this state-sponsored fear paralyzes civil society and prevents the formation of a broad-based, unified movement against corruption. While brave individuals and groups continue to challenge the system, they do so at great personal risk and often without the mass support needed to effect real change. The government's strategy is to isolate and punish dissenters, making an example of them to deter others. Until citizens feel safe to demand accountability without fear of retaliation from the police or other state agents, the powerful will continue to operate with impunity, and the deeply rooted culture of corruption will persist as the unfortunate norm. Despite the deeply entrenched nature of corruption and the climate of fear, the path to a more transparent and accountable Uganda is not entirely lost. It requires a committed, multifaceted approach that addresses both the symptoms and the root causes of the crisis. The first and most critical step is to dismantle the culture of impunity. This means moving beyond rhetoric and taking decisive legal action against high-profile officials implicated in graft. Fair and transparent trials, free from political interference, would send a powerful signal that no one is above the law. International partners can support this by continuing to apply targeted sanctions against corrupt individuals, as seen with recent UK and US actions. Secondly, the state must protect and empower those who dare to expose wrongdoing. This involves repealing repressive laws like the common nuisance charge and respecting the constitutional rights to peaceful assembly and free speech. Robust whistleblower protection laws must be enacted and, more importantly, strictly enforced to shield individuals from retaliation. When citizens, journalists, and civil servants can report corruption without fearing for their jobs, their safety, or their freedom, the flow of information necessary to hold power to account will be unleashed. The government must see its people not as a threat to be silenced, but as its greatest ally in the fight for good governance. Furthermore, transforming the system requires radical transparency and the strengthening of independent institutions. Government budgets, public procurement contracts, and the declared assets of public officials must be made easily accessible to the public. Empowering independent bodies like the Auditor General's Office and supporting a free and vibrant press are crucial for monitoring government actions and exposing malfeasance. Reforming the judiciary to ensure its independence and ending the practice of trying civilians in military courts are essential steps toward rebuilding public trust in the rule of law, ensuring that justice is not just for the powerful and connected. The vision of a Uganda with dramatically reduced corruption is a vision of a nation realizing its true potential. It is a country where the UGX 9.1 trillion lost annually is invested in quality healthcare, modern infrastructure, and education for its children. It is a society where young people secure jobs based on merit, not connections, and where entrepreneurs can thrive without the burden of bribes. Achieving this new normal will be a long and arduous struggle, requiring immense courage from its citizens and a fundamental shift in political will from its leaders. Yet, it is a future worth fighting for, a more just, prosperous, and equitable Uganda for all.